Should the Saints trade Marshon Lattimore? So the Marshon Lattimore and the Saints and the contract and the trade rumors is becoming a hot topic since he restructured his deal, and it's very complicated, not going to lie. And salary cap, the two things that probably get the most complicated when it comes to the NFL offseason are draft picks and salary cap or contracts. And this situation has both. So we're going to listen to Matt Moscona on After Further Review talk about this, and I will try and explain the situation as far as why the Saints should trade him, why they shouldn't trade him, and what it means as far as the contract.
One of the big conversations around the Saints roster the past several months has been Marshon Lattimore's future with the New Orleans Saints. And Mickey Loomis went on the Adam Sheen show on Sirius XM, part of Mad Dog Radio, and just was asked point blank about Lattimore, and he says they are not trying. We'll just give a listen. Here's Loomis.
Look, when a guy's a really good player for your team, they're not on the market per se. But there are times when you get a call and somebody makes a proposal and it might make sense for you. That's true for any player on our team. You know,
I believe Mickey when he says that. I believe him when he says that because I think both those things are true. And it makes total sense. Here's the deal. When the Saints restructured Lattimore's contract, they had to restructure it in order for them to be able to trade it. Okay, so what happened was Lattimore, because we kick bonuses and options down the road, we all know the Saints do that, sometimes it builds up. The Saints were already in a salary cap situation. Lattimore's contract / bonus that he was supposed to have at the end of last season made it to where the Saints could not have afforded him. They could not have made it work with the cap. So what they did was restructured the contract. When they restructured the contract, that opened up the possibility of trading Lattimore. They obviously had to do that, right? Like, you're not going to restructure a contract. You're not going to restructure a player to where you have absolutely no options. So do I believe Mickey when he says we are not actively trying to trade Marshon Lattimore? Yes, I definitely believe him, because why would they? Why would they be actively trying to trade him? All they did was they restructured it to where if a team wants him, it is possible for him to be traded. So it's kind of like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, where he is certainly not like, hey guys, we got to trade Marshon Lattimore. Like, that's not the conversation. The conversation is he is available for the right price.
If you get an offer you can't refuse, you at least have to look at it. And so that's what I would say. I'm not actively trying to trade Marshon. Marshon's such a good player. He's an elite corner. He's had some injuries the last couple of seasons that have kept him, off the field. And, we've got to get over that. It's not his fault. It's just circumstances. And so, that's just where we're at.
So Loomis says they're not actively trying to trade Marshon Lattimore. I want to delve into this a little deeper, but let me first just give you a little bit of a timeline. If you're just hearing that and going, why are we talking about trading Marshon Lattimore? Yes, they drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry, but follow back with what Loomis has said. So this was in January, okay?
The timeline is simple. And this whole situation, honestly, is pretty simple. The situation is that the Saints cannot give Marshon the money that they have basically said they're going to give him. The contract does not work for the Saints. So the Saints have to, it's the same thing as the Michael Thomas situation, where every year, like this year, if we don't trade Marshon, at the end of this year, we will be in the same situation where he's going to be due to pay something like $30 million to Marshon. We cannot do that. So then they're going to have to do what they always do, which is make the salary the league minimum, and then they're going to have to turn the rest of it into a bonus or an option, hopefully for another team to pick up. If the Saints trade Marshon before, I think it's June 1st, then they have to pay him. They have to pay him what he's owed. They can't do that. If they trade him from June 1st to the beginning of the season, so let's just call it September 1st, June 1st to September 1st, they do not have to pay him besides the options or the bonuses that he's due. So it saves them a ton of money in cap if they trade him in that window. If they don't trade him at all, then they have to figure it out at the end of next season, and they'll just do the same thing they just did. So it's complicated because there's like void years and there's credits when you pay a player, part of an option that hasn't been fulfilled yet. Like, it's very confusing. So I'm going to try and make this. I could just pull up some Excel spreadsheet and try and show y'all the actual cap situation. This is strictly a dollars deal. The Saints don't want to trade Marshon. Marshon's awesome. Marshon's a really good player. The Saints can't pay Marshon. That's it. That is the end of the story. So if a team comes in and a team says, whatever team it is, by the way, sidebar, because Marshon's salary is the league minimum, that means that every team in the NFL can trade for Marshon. So it's not a situation where it's like, well, Marshon's owed $28 million. Like, what team's going to trade for that? It's league minimum. So any team can get it or trade for him, and then once they do, they can work out how they want to handle the option, whether they want to take the hit now, whether they want to move it later on in the season. It is what it is. So if a team comes around and like, let's say the San Francisco 49ers, let's say they're 12-0 and they're in a position where they think they're going to win the Super Bowl, and they say, you know what? We need a cornerback. If we had a lockdown corner, we'll probably win this thing. And they give the Saints a second-round pick. The Saints are going to say, okay, see you later, Marshon. Now that goes to the next part of this is, what do you actually get for Marshon? What do you trade? Like, what is fair value? You're not going to get fair value because everyone knows what you're trying to do. You're going to get probably about the same thing that Jalen Ramsey got, or the Rams got for Jalen Ramsey, which was a third-round pick. So it's strictly like, how do you want Marshon off the books now? Do you want Marshon off the books later? And if you're the Saints, you got to think, well, the longer this goes, the less his value will be. There's a chance he gets injured. There's a chance we can't even trade him if he gets hurt, right? So that's why the talk is so feverish right now. It's nothing to do with trading him as the player or like, well, we can get a first-round pick for him. No, you cannot. Right, it is strictly like, how bad do we have to get him off the books, and when is the emergency date where we have to get him off the books, or we're going to be stuck with him?
January, Loomis was asked about Lattimore's the contract and what it meant for his future in New Orleans.
What's the thinking behind the timing of reworking Marshon Lattimore's bonus, like while the season was still going on, and making it an option bonus? Like, I mean, obviously some of those.
It's just cap.
This part right here. So why did they do it when they did it? If they would have restructured his deal before the season like everybody else, then they wouldn't get the benefit of that like post June 1st timeline that I said earlier. So they have a window where if they trade him in that window, which is after June 1st, then they don't have to pay him. They don't have to pay him the entirety of the contract. If they were to do that, if they were to restructure it before the season, they wouldn't get those post-June 1st benefits. So that's why they restructured it when they restructured it.
Management, I don't want to get into the details of it.
There wasn't a purpose to be like that?
Yeah, there's a purpose. I'm not going to tell you what the purpose is.
Consider trading?
It's just cap. It's just cap management. That's what it is.
Cap management. Okay, so that got a lot of people's antennas up, because the way the deal was structured is that, and I don't want to lose you with this because I know not everybody really cares deeply about contract structure, and it's just like who's on the team and who's not. But ultimately, Marshon Lattimore for 2024, his cap hit is $14.6 million. It means if he's on the roster, he costs you $14.6 million. If he's not on the roster, he costs you $31.2 million. That's his dead cap number, okay? So if he's not on the roster, it's $31.2 million, okay? But here's the interesting part about how they structured it. When they structured it, there are always these sort of addendums for if you have a pre or post June 1st trade or release.
I mean, I nailed it. Come on.
If the Saints were to trade or release Marshon Lattimore after June 1 this year, the number goes down to 10.6 from 14 to 10, right? His cap hit goes from 14 to 10 million. And the dead number, I'm sorry, forgive me. The dead number goes from 31 million down to 10 million. So if you were to trade or release Marshon Lattimore after June 1, so means he would not be on the team. You wouldn't be hit with that $31 million cap hit. Your cap hit would be $10 million.
Yes.
Now remember, if he's on the roster, it costs you 14. So either way, the point being that financially, it would make sense. Now, next year,
same thing happens next year. Exact same thing. They are basically saying we're going to keep doing these like 1-year restructurings to give us the option to trade him, and we eventually have to.
Could off-ramp off of Lattimore's deal as well, but if you trade him post June 1 this year, the number would be $20 million next year, whereas his cap number next year is $31 million. So either way, point being, to boil it down, the way they structured his deal is that they could trade or release Marshon Lattimore after June 1 this year, and they'd save money this year and next year.
Yeah.
It's basically how it's structured now. So that when Loomis was pressed, that's why he was pressed about it. And he just kept saying, oh, it's cap, it's cap. Well, it's cap in the event that he's not on the team.
It is cap, no cap.
He was asked.
No cap, it's cap.
Point blank, as all these conversations started happening, he was asked before the draft about Lattimore being on the team for 2024.
Do you feel like pretty confident that Marshon Lattimore is going to be on this roster this year?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he will be. Well, why would this is again like Mickey kind of sounds like a supervillain because people they don't just use common sense. Like, of course he's going to say yes, he will be on the roster unless he is traded. But Mickey's not going to say no, he won't be on the roster. We're going to trade him before then because you don't know if there's a trade available. So the only the two options he has to say is yes and no, right? Yes, he's going to be on the team is the easy one because if nothing happens, he will be on the team. Why would Mickey say no, he will not be on the team when there's no evidence at all that a trade will have happened? You know, like they try and make a huge deal out of this, but it's just like Mickey always takes the easiest answer. He always takes the answer that is factual, is easy, and he doesn't have to explain it.
Confident. Well, that's the day, 2 days before the draft, and then they draft Kool-Aid McKinstry. So then
Kool-Aid has nothing to do with it. I'll tell you that. The Kool-Aid pick has nothing to do with Marshon being traded. The Kool-Aid pick is this was a really good player at this position. We know we are probably going to have to get off of Marshon at some point because we're going to have to keep doing this song and dance every single year. At some point, we're probably going to have to get off of him. And if a team is willing to trade for him, we are going to get off of him. So all that drafting Kool-Aid does is gets a really good player to a position that they know there could be some volatility there. That's it. Like, it's not, oh, we're drafting Kool-Aid because we are for sure about to trade Marshon.
All of the conversations start coming back up about, well, are they really going to move on from Lattimore because they now drafted McKinstry? What do we always say? Actions speak louder than words. You can tell me, well, it's a cap thing and you expect Lattimore to be on the team, but then you go trade up in round 2 to take a cornerback, and it makes you look and go, maybe they are looking at trading Lattimore. So
they are willing to trade Marshon. Like, that's a huge difference. And again, I don't know how this is confusing. The most volatile position on this team right now is in the secondary because of the contract manipulation with Marshon. They know it is a very tight, like razor's thin situation where they can dance around the cap. They also know he's probably their biggest asset as far as like who another team would want to acquire. So they restructure his deal so that can happen, so that they could possibly use their best asset. That part makes perfect sense, right? You wouldn't want to lock up your only asset that other teams may want to acquire. There's nothing nefarious about it. And then the draft happens. So you have this, your best asset is Marshon Lattimore. You have restructured his deal so that if the situation arises where you can move off of him, you might. So you draft Kool-Aid. Makes perfect sense. Again, there's nothing nefarious about like, oh, let's draft Kool-Aid so that we can do this. It's just giving you a backup plan in case the stars align and you do trade him. But I think Mickey, if you hooked him up to a lie detector test, I think he would say, I'm totally fine with having Marshon on this team this year. And I think that would be true. And I'm totally fine with it too. I would rather have Marshon Lattimore on the team than not. So it's nothing to do with like him as a player. It's nothing to do with, moving off of that era of player. It's strictly cap. It is strictly salary cap. It's strictly money. That is 100% what this situation is. That's it. It's so simple.
Back to the interview on Mad Dog Radio, Loomis was asked, what drafting McKinstry in the second round means for Lattimore and his future in New Orleans.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. Marshon's been a really good player for us for a good period of time. He's one of the leaders of our team. And look, it's just like I said, we can use as many corners as we can get. And we've got a good group, a really good group, and they're going to help each other and they're going to help our team win.
Okay, this may surprise you.
Agreed.
But I actually believe Mickey Loomis there.
Yeah,
I think they saw a player they had rated much higher than 41 overall, had a chance to go get him, and so they did. And it was prudent because you saw the run coming on cornerbacks, and they saw a guy they wanted, and so they took him. And it's true that you can never have too many cornerbacks. Like, that's just not a real thing in the NFL. The NFL is, as we all know, becoming a more offensive and pass-centric league. Okay, well, how do you defend the pass? You rush the passer, and you have really good quarterbacks, or cornerbacks, excuse me. So you look at where the Saints are right now, and you've got three guys in Lattimore, Adebo, and Alontae Taylor, all of whom have had injury issues. Marshon Lattimore has been in the league since 2017. He has played one full season. Now, I'm not bagging on Marshon Lattimore. Marshon Lattimore, let me be very clear. Marshon Lattimore is the best cornerback in this franchise's history. Full stop. There is no conversation. There is no discussion. Marshon Lattimore is the best cornerback in franchise history. Period. You want a healthy Marshon Lattimore on your team.
Yes. Like all of this is pretty obvious, no doubt.
The problem is, in 7 years, Lattimore's played one full season.
That's not the problem. The problem is that he's owed more money than the Saints can pay. That's the problem. The problem has nothing to do with his injury history. The problem has nothing to do with how he plays in man versus zone versus this stat versus that stat versus this age versus that age. The problem is that the Saints are salary cap restricted, and Marshon is getting paid a lot of money, and they cannot take the cap hit that he is due to take. That's it.
His second year in the league. In the last 2 years, Lattimore has played in 7 games in 2022 and 10 games this past year, meaning
if he played in 17 games, we would be in the same situation. If he was the defensive player of the year, we would be in the same situation. It has nothing to do with what's going on the field.
The last 2 seasons.
The only thing that on the field has to do with this is what other teams believe his value is. That's it.
He has missed 17 games, which is a full season. Same as Marcus May, who you just cut. Now, Marcus May at his best has never been as good as Lattimore,
totally
and they play a different position. But you're still talking about a guy that has missed a ton of time the last 2 years. Paulson Adebo played every game as a rookie, then went 13 games, then 15 games a year ago. So he has missed time. Alontae Taylor, as a rookie, played in just 13 games. Last year, played a full season. Point is, all 3 of your primary cornerbacks have missed time. And Lattimore, the oldest of the 3, has missed the most, including 17 games combined over the last 2 years. So it is prudent for Mickey Loomis and the New Orleans Saints to see a great value at cornerback and say, let's go get that guy. I'm wholeheartedly on board with drafting Kool-Aid McKinstry. And it didn't have to be Kool-Aid. If it's a player, a cornerback that they felt they had great value on and could be a starter, awesome. The other thing this allows you is options after this season. Even if Lattimore plays this year, there's no guarantee Lattimore, Adebo, or Taylor all stay healthy for 17 games. They've shown you they can't. So odds are McKinstry's going to play a lot this year. That's number one. Number two, it gives you options next year. Because the way Lattimore's contract is structured is that even...
It gives you options, period. Like, that's where the sentence should end. It just gives you options. Because if a team comes in and wants to trade for Lattimore, okay, do the trade. You've got Kool-Aid. If Lattimore gets hurt, Kool-Aid's there. If Taylor gets hurt, Kool-Aid's there. If you trade Lattimore at the end of the season, Kool-Aid's there. If Kool-Aid just develops and gets really good, you just have a really good player. Like, it's one of those positions where, like, if you draft a quarterback, only one quarterback can play, right, at a time. That's not how defensive backs work. That's not even how, like, linebackers or edge players work. You don't draft an edge And then you say, oh man, we must be trading Cam Jordan. We must be trading Carl Granderson. We must be trading all these random players. You know, you don't draft a wide receiver and say, damn, we about to trade Chris Olave? Like those are positions you can play multiple people. You can rotate them in and out. Like it is the safest position to draft a good player while also having good players.
Even if he does play on the team this year.
If Malik Neighbors would have fallen to the Saints pick and we drafted Malik Neighbors, nobody would have written a story with the headline, Malik Neighbors drafted by the Saints, is Chris Olave on the way out? Is Chris Olave on the block? You know, like, so there's no reason you should think the same thing with defensive backs.
The off-ramp is built next year, meaning you don't have to wait until post-June 1, and you don't have to worry about, do you have a trade partner? Lattimore's contract next year, he's owed $31.4 million. The dead cap number is 20.6. So you'd save $11 million next year by not having Marshon Lattimore on your team for 2025. So you could off-ramp out of this contract next year. And then you've got McKinstry ready to go. You've also got Paulson Adebo in a contract year. What if you don't want to pay Adebo before this year? You want to see how it plays out. Let's say Adebo has an awesome season and the suitors are lined up, ready to break the bank. Well, you don't have to match it because you've got Kool-Aid McKinstry. I get it. I think drafting him made an awful lot of sense. Mickey Loomis said point blank that he is not actively shopping Marshon Lattimore. He's not actively trying to trade him.
Yeah.
I believe him.
Same. He's not. He's listening to offers.
But he also said if you get the offer you can't refuse, you listen. And that may happen come post-June 1 because it would make sense financially. The Saints could recoup assets, and you have a young player like Kool-Aid McKinstry that could step in. And if it doesn't, okay. You make it make sense because of the way you structured the deal this year. You can off-ramp next year and make your decision with what you want to do. It makes a lot of sense. And I believe Mickey Loomis. They're not actively shopping him. They listen if they got a great offer. And I think having Kool-Aid McKinstry not only does it mean he will play this year, it is a great insurance policy for potential injury this year and for what you do with Lattimore and Adebo next year.
Yeah, I mean, like, Matt, he kind of got there, but he also mixed a little bit. He mixed a little bit of the stuff that doesn't matter. Like, I hear a lot about, why would you trade Marshon? He's so good. It's like, that's not part of it. It's nothing to do with how good he is or how not good he is. It's strictly, can they fit his contract under the cap? That's it. You know, and like if they're forecasting next year and they're forecasting the next year or whatever, and they're sitting there thinking like, we can't take a $30 million cap hit. We can't do that. We have to get off of them. We have to try and move some stuff around. Then, you know, that's the whole conversation. And then simultaneously, like, you don't trade him. I've also heard people who are like, I'd trade Marshon for a first. You know, if we can get a first round pick, I'd trade Marshon. So, okay, well, yeah, I would too. But it's not about that either. It's not about utilizing him as an asset to get a first round pick. That's not possible. Jalen Ramsey was traded for a third. That's probably where Lattimore's value is going to be, right around a third round pick. So it's nothing to do with like how much can we get. It's like that is part of it, I guess. Like, but it's how much can we get while navigating the cap. It's not your motivation is not driven by strictly getting assets. You're not saying like, let's trade away our best defensive player for draft picks. That's not the motivation. The motivation is, you know, the cap. Can we balance the cap? Can we handle the cap? And if you decide you can't, then you certainly want to get as much value as you can for Marshon while he is still perceived as valuable for the rest of the league. You know, so it's like both of those ideas are kind of in the right direction, but they miss the mark. So I'm hoping this video kind of explains a little bit better of like why the Saints actually do want to trade Marshon, or why they would want to trade Marshon. What happens if the Saints do trade him? What if they don't? There's a website, what the hell is this? There's a website called Over the Cap, and they go into these like super detailed and super complex cap situations, and they have one on Marshon. So I'll link that in the description below. But they have it broken up into the contract structure, the cost of a trade for the Saints, what is the cost of the acquiring team. And you can see here, like the cost of the acquiring team is $4 million. That's the league minimum, right? So they took, you can see how they did all this, right? But, and then what might trade compensation look like? Should the Saints make the trade? if the Saints believe, and this is why I think the Saints probably will make the trade, because if the Saints are a 7, 8, 9, 10 win team and they're not pushing for a Super Bowl, they're not pushing for that conference championship, and they're looking around, they're like, we're kind of in the middle of the league and we have this salary cap situation, we probably need to take this moment while we're kind of average, while we're kind of soft rebuilding, we need to take this moment to free up some salary cap and get some draft picks for later on. Now, if they surprise the world and the Saints are a 12-win, 13-win team, they probably won't move Marshon because they'll probably say, let's try and win. Let's try and win now, and then we'll deal with this. We'll do the same thing we just did. We'll kick the can next year. We'll restructure again, and then we'll try and do this next year. So, and like I said, I'll link this in the description below so that you can read it. It's very interesting as far as like, because they talk about like the void years and all the random stuff like that that you don't even think about. It's like, man, the cap manipulation, all that is so wild. So I'll put that in the comments below. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. What do you think the Saints should do with Marshon Lattimore? What are you hoping they do? Did this help you kind of understand the situation a little better? Were you surprised at any of this and surprised at kind of how much, how much that a team or a GM or a contract can impact how players are moved? Because a lot of times you can think like, oh, it's just a player. So, a player is a player, a contract is a contract. But then you see like the June 1st stuff, post June 1, the void years, the dead money, the cap charge, the league minimum, the whatever, the credits, like it can be a lot. So let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.